Alright guys, you guys really seem to like my top 10 primal spells video, so it's time for me to cover divine spells. Let's get into it. So first up, I want to talk about my personal favorite cantrip, and one that is also available on the occult list, Forbidding War. This spell allows you to target one ally and one enemy within 30 feet. As long as you sustain this spell, the target ally gains a +1 bonus to all its defenses against the targeted enemy. And yes, that includes armor class and all saving throws. This spell is fantastic for boss fights, as generally in boss fights there's only one enemy to target. Great spell, highly recommend. Now of course, I can't do a top 10 divine spells list without talking about the heal spell. You can spend anywhere from 1 action to 3 actions on this spell. If you spend 1 action on this spell, it has a range of touch and heals 1d8 per spell level. If you spend 2 actions on this spell, then it has a range of 30 feet and heals 1d8 plus 8 per spell level. And if you spend 3 actions on this spell, it becomes a 30-foot emanation. This version of the spell heals all living creatures in the area for 1d8 hit points per spell level. However, what a lot of new players don't understand is that this version of the spell also damages all undead creatures in the area for the same amounts. Thus, if you're facing undead creatures, you can heal your party and damage the undead at the exact same time. Being able to heal allies is always a good teamwork option. For a second level spell for this video, I've gone with Resist Energy. This is one that's available to all casters, but I'm covering it here. When you cast this spell, choose Acid, Cold, Electricity, Fire, or Sonic damage. One creature you touch gains Resistance 5 to that energy type. Heightening this spell increases the resistance and the number of creatures you can target. This spell isn't great in the beginning, but as you level up, you're going to run into more and more creatures that can do elemental damage. Thus, this spell becomes more and more useful as you level up. Rouse Skeletons creates difficult terrain that damages enemies and that you can move. It is only a 10-foot burst, and you can only move it 20 feet per round. But a lot of people don't realize how powerful difficult terrain actually is. And this is one of the best ways to get difficult terrain, since you can move it around, even if it is just a little bit. Painful Vibrations is another spell that is very good. This spell targets one living creature within 100 feet. They must make a Fortitude saving throw against 8d6 sonic damage. If they don't critically succeed, then they take at least half that. However, if they at least fail their saving throw, then they are sickened and deafened. Sickened is basically fear on steroids. And deafened is a pretty good condition as well. So a spell that can do both of those, plus 8d6 sonic damage? Of course I'm going to cover this one. The next spell on this list is Wall of Flesh. This one is especially good for clerics because it's a wall that can be healed by your extra heal spells. In addition, when you cast this spell, you can choose to give the wall eyes, mouths, or arms. If you choose to give the wall arms, then the wall can grab creatures near it. If you choose to give the wall mouths, the wall can bite enemies and you can feed it potions. But what I think is the best application of this spell is to give the wall eyes, because then you can use the wall for line of sight for your spells. Thus, you can target creatures that are on the other side of the wall as long as the spell requires line of sight and not line of effect. Try combining this spell with a good champion and the Protector Tree spell and see what happens. Scintillating Safeguard requires a reaction and targets up to 5 willing creatures within 30 feet. When an effect would deal physical or energy damage to the targets, those targets gain resistance 10 to that type of damage. Not only does this give resistance to any type of physical or energy damage, but it's also a reaction that targets up to 5 creatures. You gotta be careful though, because it does only work on the initial damage, not any afterward damage. And it's only against that one effect. Thus, in some ways, resist energy is better. But this is a good spell. Energy Aegis targets one creature that you can touch and lasts until your next daily preparations. The target gains resistance 5 to acid, cold, electricity, fire, force, negative, positive, and sonic damage, which is pretty much all types of energy damage. This spell is good for when you know that you're going to run into enemies that can do elemental damage, but you don't know what type of elemental damage. But resist energy is better when you know what type of energy damage you're going to be taking, as that spell, heightened to this level, can target more creatures. And now we come to my personal favorite 8th level spell, Divine Aura. This one is Forbidding Ward on steroids. This spell affects all allies in a 10-foot emanation, giving them a +1 bonus to AC and saving throws. In addition, when you cast this spell, choose an alignment that your deity has. You cannot cast this spell if you don't have a deity, or if your deity is true neutral. The bonuses granted from this spell increase to +2 against creatures of the alignment opposite the one you chose. For example, if you chose to make this spell good, then the allies would get a +2 bonus to AC and saves against evil creatures. Also, if those creatures hit a target with an attack, they must make a will saving throw. If they fail, then they are blinded for 1 minute. You can also increase the radius of this spell by 10 feet every time you sustain it. I think it's pretty obvious why this spell is good, but it is only available to divine casters with a non-true neutral deity, which is probably why it's an 8th level spell and not a 9th level spell. Next up, we have the Foresight spell. This spell targets one creature other than yourself and lasts for 1 hour. You create a mental link with that creature and gain the Foresight reaction. If the target defends against a hostile creature and that creature forces the target to roll a dice, then the target rolls that dice twice and takes the higher results. Also, if that creature is rolling a dice against the target, that creature must roll twice and take the lower results. For those of you that are coming from 5e to Pathfinder 2e, what that essentially means is that you can give the target advantage against anything that requires a dice roll from a hostile creature once per round. And yes, that does include any saving throws the target has to make. And you can also give any hostile creature disadvantage on a roll against the target once per round. Like say, for an attack roll. Advantage and disadvantage are so rare in Pathfinder 2e that I have to cover this spell. And the final spell for this video is going to be Revival. This spell targets dead and living creatures within 30 feet of your choice. All living creatures in the area heal for 10d8 plus 40 hit points. The dead creatures you targeted come back to life and gain temporary hit points equal to the amount that the living creatures healed, but no regular hit points. However, those that are raised from the dead can't regain hit points in other ways. And once Revival's duration ends, they lose those temporary hit points and die. This spell cannot resurrect people that were killed by a disintegrate spell or a death effect. This spell can bring the party completely back from the brink. Oh, you're a divine caster and you're the only one left? Not anymore, you're not, when you cast this spell. Yeah, if you get far enough to cast this spell, you should always have this prepared. And those are the top 10 spells I recommend for divine casters. I will definitely be covering occult spells here pretty soon. If you haven't seen my top 10 arcane or primal spells videos yet, they're right here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see ya next time.